And joining us now is former mayor, attorney, and host of the Standpoint podcast, Gabriel Groissman. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Gabriel, the ICJ came out with this decision on Friday. It seems the wording of the ICJ's order regarding the Rafah operation is somewhat ambiguous. From your understanding, what does it mean exactly?
Look, the message is more important than what the wording is. If you look at actually the ruling, you can listen to it online. I listened to it this morning. They're saying that the operation should halt so there can be a further investigation of potential genocide, which we all know is absolute nonsense. The message is clear, and Hamas got that message. As this morning, as I'm sure you've reported, there's been a barrage of rockets from Hamas from Gaza to civilians in Israel, because what the ICJ did by making this ruling is give a green light to Hamas to continue attacking civilians, to continue its unbelievably unprecedented attack on civilian life in Israel with the protection of the world community. That's what the ICJ's ruling meant. Hamas, don't worry, we've got your back. That's the message of the United Nations this weekend.
Now, what does this decision mean for Israel? Is it binding?
So technically it's binding, but they don't have really any enforcement mechanism. So really what it is just another layer of pressure that the international community is putting on Israel. Israel is becoming more isolated. That is true. It's becoming a more divisive issue around the world. We have the International Criminal Court also, as I'm sure you've reported, seeking warrants potentially against Netanyahu and Gallant. These are just layers upon layers of international pressure that are being laid upon Israel to have them stop their war against Hamas, to stop their attempt to save the hostages and to fight back against this terror organization.
What further actions can the ICJ take if its orders are not fully adhered to?
I mean, that's a good question. They don't have any enforcement mechanism, so they can continue to condemn Israel. They can continue to create pressure, but they can't really do much. The ICJ, much like the ICC, is a kangaroo court. The ICC does have a mechanism with warrants and arrests that's a little bit more dangerous for those individual leaders that they're seeking warrants against. But the ICJ, it's just, we're going to hear more and more statements and condemnations and resolutions. But if you just peel the onion a little bit and see who's sitting in the ICJ, who's sitting in the United Nations Security Council, the bodies that are making these decisions, you're seeing that although these entities may have begun with the best of intentions, they've been taken over by the worst actors in the world.
Now, clearly, as we see and as is being reported, Israel has safely evacuated about 1 million Palestinians out of Rafah, and the U.S. now seems on board as opposed to previous concerns that they've voiced in the past. Can we expect the U.S. to veto the ICJ decision in the Security Council? Do you assess that it will?
That's a great question. It's a new day in the United States where we were not sure that the United States government will support Israel, but that's just the reality. The U.S. is supporting Israel's attack on Rafah only if it's a limited nature. So the all reports are there's some sort of agreement on a limited engagement in Rafah as opposed to a full-scale invasion. But you can't be half pregnant and you can't go to war halfway, which is what the United States wants Israel to do. Will the United States veto the resolution that will be coming by the UN Security Council? I hope so, but I don't take it to the bank.
Now let's talk about the global ramifications. Even if this decision is not binding legally, how does it impact Israel's image worldwide, which we know is not so great and not in a great state as it is?
Yeah, Israel's image worldwide has been tarnished. That's just a reality that we in the Jewish community around the world and the pro-Israel community around the world have to wrestle with. It's just a reality. The ICJ opinion will, in the United States, for example, won't have big ramifications here in the sense that people don't look at the United Nations with the same eyes that people around the world do. But in Europe and South America and Asia, really on the rest of the planet, the words of the United Nations and the ICJ really do have a lot of meaning. I think we're going to see a continued pressure from economic pressure, diplomatic pressure from countries around the world, countries that we've looked at as allies. Case in point was Germany, who throughout this war has been pretty good for Israel, which has been a breath of fresh air given the history of Germany. But just this week, they said on the ICJ matter that if there is an arrest warrant, they're going to enforce the arrest warrant. And just so the viewers know, there's never been an arrest warrant issued by the ICC against a sitting head of state. But this is the first one, and why not against the Jewish state?
Gabriel Groissman, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.